They laughed when he paid 50 cents for a rotting barn. They mocked him, said he had bought nothing but ghosts. But when Caleb Turner stepped inside those broken doors, he found something no rancher had ever dared to touch. What he uncovered would freeze his blood, shatter his faith, and leave an entire town trembling in fear. This is not just a story about a barn. It's about the price of curiosity, the weight of secrets buried in the dark, and a man who discovered that some doors are never meant to be opened. The summer sun blazed over the plains when news spread across the dusty little town. An old barn at the far edge of the valley had been sold for only 50 cents. People laughed when they heard it. A barn? For half a dollar? They scoffed. To them, it wasn't even worth a nickel. The place had been abandoned for years, leaning crooked against the winds, its timbers rotting, its roof half collapsed. Children whispered that it was cursed, while grown men shook their heads and called it a waste of land. No rancher dared to go near it, yet one man did. His name was Caleb Turner, a ranch hand who had spent most of his life working other men's land, always dreaming of owning something of his own. 50 cents was all he had left in his pocket after weeks of grueling labor, and when he heard the barn was being auctioned off, something inside him whispered he should take it. No one else raised a hand. The crowd chuckled as Caleb stepped forward, pressed his single worn coin into the sheriff's palm, and signed his name to the paper. Just like that, the old barn belonged to him. People clapped him on the back, not in congratulations, but in mockery. "All you bought was a pile of ghosts," one rancher said with a smirk. But Caleb ignored them. He had nothing else, and to him, even a broken-down barn was worth more than ridicule. With determination set deep in his eyes, he saddled his horse and rode out toward his new property. The path to the barn was overgrown, tangled with weeds that rattled dry in the wind. When he reached the clearing, he halted, staring at the structure that now belonged to him. It stood like a skeleton of wood and shadow, its doors hanging loose, its windows shattered. The air around it felt colder somehow, even under the burning sun. His horse shifted nervously, snorting, ears pinned back. Caleb patted its neck and whispered calm words, though even he felt a strange unease crawling across his skin. He dismounted and stepped closer. Each footfall on the dry earth echoed too loud in his ears, as if the land itself held its breath. The barn loomed above him, worn boards groaning in the wind. The smell of mold and dust hung heavy. He placed his hand against the door. The wood was damp, almost sticky, as if it had been crying with rot. Caleb hesitated, then pushed. The hinges screamed as the door gave way, opening into darkness. A wave of cold air rushed out, chilling him to the bone. Inside, the barn was cloaked in shadows. Shafts of light pierced through gaps in the roof, catching swirls of dust that hung like restless spirits. He stepped inside slowly, his boots crunching on the dirt floor. Something felt wrong. It wasn't just the silence. It was deeper, heavier, as though the place itself held secrets that wanted to stay buried. Cobwebs clung to the rafters, thick as curtains. Old tools lay scattered, rusted and broken, as if someone had left in a hurry years ago. Caleb's breath grew shallow. He told himself it was just an old barn, nothing more. But his instincts whispered otherwise. Then he saw it. In the far corner, half covered in hay and broken boards, something jutted out. First, he thought it was just debris, but as his eyes adjusted to the gloom, the shape grew clearer. It was a box. Large, heavy, bound in iron. Strange markings were carved into the wood, lines and symbols he didn't recognize. The air around it seemed colder, sharper, and his skin prickled as though unseen eyes were watching him. His heart pounded in his chest. What was a chest like that doing here, hidden in a barn no one dared touch? He took a step closer, then another, each movement slow, deliberate. His hand trembled as he reached for the lid, brushing away dust and straw. The metal bindings were blackened, corroded, yet still strong. He tried to lift it, but the chest wouldn't budge. It was as though the earth itself was holding it down. Suddenly, a low creak echoed above. Caleb froze, glancing up. The rafters shifted in the shadows, and for a moment he swore he saw movement, like a figure crouched high above watching him. His throat tightened. "Hello?" His voice cracked through the silence, but no answer came. Only the groan of wood and the faint rustle of hay. His horse outside whinnied, stomping nervously. Caleb backed away a step, his boots dragging through the dirt, but his eyes locked again on the chest, and something inside him refused to turn away. Fear clawed at him, but curiosity burned stronger. He pulled at the lid again. This time it moved just slightly, groaning against the iron. A draft of icy air spilled out, carrying a smell that made his stomach turn. Something foul, like rotten smoke, tangled together. He staggered back, gagging, but his gaze never left the chest. In that moment, a sound rose from within. Not a creak, not a groan, but something else, something alive. A faint scratching, like nails raking against wood. Caleb's breath caught in his throat. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to leave the barn and never return. But he couldn't. His hands shook as he gripped the lid again, pulling harder. The chest shifted, then opened a crack wide enough for him to see inside. What he saw made his blood run cold. Two glimmering eyes stared back at him from the darkness within. Two glimmering eyes stared back at Caleb from the darkness inside the chest. For a long moment he could not breathe, could not move. His hands tightened on the lid as every nerve in his body screamed to shut it, to seal whatever was inside. But his curiosity pinned him there. Those eyes did not blink, did not shift. They only glowed faintly, like embers smoldering in the dark. Caleb's lips parted as a whisper escaped him. "What are you?" The scratching stopped. Silence pressed in, heavier than before. Then, slowly, deliberately, a sound rose from the chest. A low growl, deep and guttural, that did not belong in the world of cattle and ranches. The sound rattled through his bones, and his blood turned to ice. His first instinct was to slam the lid shut, but before he could, the chest lurched violently. Something inside struck against it, shaking the iron bindings. Caleb stumbled back, the lid slamming shut on its own with a thunderous bang that echoed through the barn. Dust rained down from the rafters. His horse outside shrieked and bolted, hooves pounding against the earth as it fled. Caleb's chest heaved as he staggered toward the barn doors, ready to escape. But just as his hand touched the frame, he stopped. A whisper curled through the shadows. Not a growl this time, but a voice. Low, broken, almost human. "Help! Me!" Caleb froze. His skin prickled as the word sank into him. It hadn't been the wind. It hadn't been his imagination. Something inside that chest had spoken. He turned, his heart hammering. The chest sat motionless in the far corner, cloaked in shadows. The air hung heavy, thick with the smell of rot. His mind battled itself. Run or stay. Logic screamed that no good could come from opening it again, but a deeper instinct told him this was why he had been drawn to the barn in the first place. Against his own fear, Caleb stepped back into the dark. His boots dragged across the dirt floor, his breaths loud in the silence. When he reached the chest, he crouched low, his trembling fingers brushing against the iron bindings. The whisper came again, faint but clear. "Please, free me." Caleb swallowed hard. "Who's in there?" No answer came, only the soft, pitiful sound of something scratching faintly at the wood. He looked closer at the markings etched into the chest. They weren't random scratches. They were symbols, circles, jagged lines, patterns he couldn't understand. They looked carved with purpose, like warnings left by desperate hands. A shiver ran through him. Someone had locked this thing away on purpose, and every rancher who avoided this barn, they had known. They had feared what was here. But Caleb wasn't like them. All his life he had been dismissed, overlooked, treated as nothing. Now, standing here, facing a mystery no man dared touch, he felt something rise in him, courage or madness, he couldn't tell. He gripped the lid again and pulled. The chest groaned, resisting, but with one final heave it cracked open wide. What he saw inside rooted him to the spot. Curled in the darkness was not an animal nor a corpse. It was a child, a boy, no older than 12. His skin pale, his frame gaunt as though he had starved for years. But his eyes, they were not human. They burned a sickly yellow, glowing faint against the gloom. Chains bound his wrists and ankles, biting deep into his skin. His lips parted as he whispered again. "Help. Me." Caleb's throat closed. The boy's voice was raw, ragged with suffering, yet there was something behind it. Something hollow. Something that didn't belong in a human mouth. Still, Caleb's heart clenched. He saw not a monster, but a child begging for mercy. He reached forward, fumbling with the rusted chains. "Hold on," he muttered. The boy's glowing eyes followed his every move. When Caleb pulled the first shackle free, a hiss cut through the air. The boy's lips curled into a faint, unnatural smile. Caleb froze, doubt clawing through him, but he forced himself onward, snapping the second, then the third. Each chain fell with a heavy clink that echoed like a death knell. Finally, the last shackle loosened, and the boy staggered upright. He was taller than Caleb expected, his limbs thin but strangely strong. He wavered, then fixed those burning eyes on Caleb. "Thank you," he whispered. His voice now sounded different, clearer, deeper, edged with something unnatural. Caleb's stomach twisted, but before he could react, the boy stepped out of the chest. The air in the barn shifted. It grew colder, heavier, as though invisible walls closed in around them. The boy stretched his arms wide, joints cracking, head tilting back unnaturally far. "Free," he murmured. Caleb stumbled back, fear finally surging through him. "Who are you?" The boy's eyes locked on him, and for a moment they softened. "I was taken, caged, forgotten." His voice broke, and Caleb almost believed him. But then the boy's lips twisted into a grin that sent shivers racing down his spine. "And now, I am free." A sudden crash split the silence. The barn doors slammed shut on their own, the wood rattling as though struck by unseen hands. Caleb spun, lunging for the doors, but they refused to budge. He pounded against them, shouting, his voice swallowed by the barn's thick air. Behind him, footsteps creaked slowly across the dirt floor. He turned. The boy was no longer frail. His back arched unnaturally, his shoulders jutting, veins blackening beneath his pale skin. His eyes blazed brighter now, twin fires that pierced the dark. Caleb stumbled backward, horror clutching at him. The barn itself seemed to groan, rafters trembling as though alive. The boy's voice thundered, no longer weak, no longer human. "They locked me away because they feared me. Every rancher who saw me turned pale. They sealed me in chains and cursed this barn. But you?" He took a step closer, his grin widening. "You were foolish enough to set me free." Caleb's chest tightened. His breath came fast, shallow. He had freed something no man should have touched. And now, standing in the barn's suffocating dark, he realized the truth. This was what no rancher dared approach. This was the terror they whispered about, and he had unleashed it. Caleb's back struck the barn wall, his palms pressed hard against the rough wood. The thing, moved closer, each step echoing like thunder on the dirt floor. His grin stretched unnaturally wide, his glowing eyes burning through the gloom. Caleb's voice broke. You're not a boy!" The creature tilted its head, almost mocking him. "I was once. Long ago, before they bound me here, before fear twisted their hearts." His words slithered like poison, half truth, half lie. Caleb's breath came ragged. He thought of the ranchers who had warned him, of their laughter when he bought the barn for 50 cents. They hadn't feared the ruin. They had feared this. The creature's shadow stretched long across the floor, rising up the walls, filling every corner. Caleb gripped the cross around his neck, a gift from his late mother. His fingers trembled, but as the cold metal pressed into his skin, strength surged through him. His voice steadied. "If they feared you, there was reason," the boy hissed, his grin fading. "Fear is weakness. You humans bury what you cannot understand. But you—" He stepped closer, his hand reaching out, pale fingers curling like claws. "You opened the chains. You belong to me now." Caleb's heart pounded, but he forced himself to stand tall. "No, I don't." With sudden resolve, he lunged for the chest. The creature snarled, rushing after him, but Caleb slammed the lid open and shoved the chains back inside. The air thickened, the barn groaning, but he didn't stop. He grabbed the creature's arm, his hand searing as though fire licked his skin, and he dragged it toward the chest. The boy thrashed, his voice no longer human, shrieking words that split Caleb's ears. Shadows swirled, clawing at him, tearing at his clothes, but Caleb gritted his teeth and forced the writhing figure down. With one final shove, he threw the creature into the chest. The ground shook. The chains writhed like living serpents, snapping tight around the boy's arms and legs, binding him again. His eyes burned with fury as he screamed, "You cannot hold me forever!" Caleb slammed the lid shut. The iron bindings glowed faintly, then sealed themselves as though some unseen power had heard his plea. Silence fell, heavy and absolute. Caleb collapsed to his knees, his chest heaving, sweat and blood streaking his face. The barn was still. The air, once thick with rot and dread, now felt light, almost empty. His hands shook violently as he pressed them against the dirt, his eyes locked on the chest. He had done it. He had touched what no rancher dared, and lived. When Caleb staggered outside, dawn had broken across the horizon. His horse returned slowly, snorting nervously, but no longer panicked. Caleb leaned against it, his body weak, his soul heavy. He knew the truth now. The barn had been cursed for a reason, and he carried that burden alone. In town, no one asked him about the barn. No one dared. They only looked at him differently, eyes wide, voices hushed. They had laughed when he bought it. But now they watched him with the same fear they once held for the barn itself. Caleb said nothing. He had no words for what he had seen, no proof for what he had endured. All he carried was the memory of those glowing eyes and the weight of knowing he had set something free, even if only for a moment. That night, lying in the silence of his small cabin, Caleb jolted awake to a sound that froze his blood. From the far edge of the valley, carried faint. On the wind came a whisper, "Help me." And Caleb knew the chains would not hold forever. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe and join our growing family here on Legacy Ignited. Your likes and shares help us bring more powerful stories to life. Thank you for watching, and remember, you are the reason these stories live on.